Welcome back to The Explainer. Look, if you're trying to absolutely maximize your time on the water this week, you are exactly in the right place. Today, we're diving into the North San Diego County freshwater fishing forecast for the week of May 10th through the 17th. We've got the latest regional reports from Lakes Wolford, Dixon, Henshaw, and Jennings. Whether you're hunting a massive, heavy-hitting largemouth bass or you just want to pull in a beautiful stringer of panfish, the data points to some really fascinating patterns happening right now. Okay, let's just quickly look at our roadmap. We'll start off with a spring conditions overview, then move on to targeting post-spawn bass, hunting holdover trout, catfish and panfish patterns, and finally we'll wrap it up with our tactical playbook. All right, kicking things off with Section 1, Spring Conditions Overview, the May transition. So looking at the data, the water temperatures across these Southern California lakes are hitting a very specific early May window. We're talking 68 to 72 degrees. Now, you know as well as I do, this isn't just a random number. It's a biological trigger. Hitting this temperature literally shakes the fish out of that winter sluggishness and pushes them into highly predictable spring patterns. And a direct result of these rapidly warming waters is what we call the post-spawn phase. This is when bass stay up shallow to aggressively guard their newly hatched fry. You can kind of think of them like sleep-deprived, highly territorial parents, right? They aren't really feeding out of deep hunger right now, but man, they will violently attack absolutely anything that threatens their nest. Moving right along to Section 2, targeting post-spawn bass, the heavyweights. Now, check this out. Just recently, a massive, true 10-pound largemouth bass was caught over at Lake Henshaw. A double-digit fish like this, that's a critical regional indicator for us. It tells us that those big females are super active, and this whole post-spawn aggression thing is literally producing trophy-class catches as we speak. But the data shows it's not just a fluke at Lake Henshaw. Lake Wolford actually reported a massive 8.5-pound largemouth caught a bit earlier in the spring. So this pattern is holding strong across multiple lakes in the Escondido area. It's a widespread hot streak. If you've been waiting for the perfect time to hunt for a personal best, well, the window is wide open. So, the big question, how do we actually trigger these strikes? Based on all the current reports, these shallow, fry-guarding bass are absolutely crushing specific presentations. We're talking Senecos, flukes, glide baits, and topwater lures. Why these? Because you can work them nice and slow right through a fish's territory to trigger that defensive strike. I mean, buzzing a topwater lure right over a nest, that is almost guaranteed to get hammered right now. Okay, Section 3, hunting holdover trout, spring stocking power. When we look at the recent stocking data, the sheer volume of fish pumped into these local waters is frankly staggering. Both Dixon Lake and Lake Wolford each put in 1,000 pounds back in March. These are what we call holdover trout, the ones that survive that initial fishing rush. They've had time to fully acclimate to the lake, which means they often fight way harder, behaving much more like a wild native fish. But if you want the absolute highest probability of hooking into some trout this weekend, the data points straight to Lake Jennings. They were dropping a massive 1,500 pounds of trout into that water every single week throughout all of April, with their final huge plant just happening on April 30th. Let me tell you, those waters are absolutely loaded right now.
Let's pivot to Section 4, catfish and panfish patterns, shallow versus deep.
We're seeing a very classic shallow versus deep, day versus night dynamic unfolding right now. The warming waters are finally activating that catfish bite, but remember, because they're light sensitive, their activity really peaks in the dark in those early morning low light hours. Now contrast that with your panfish, like bluegill and red ear. They are using these nice 70-degree temperatures to move up onto those highly visible shallow flats to actively spawn. So basically, you've got daytime sight fishing for panfish versus low light, bottom fishing for catfish. And this brings up a really vital logistical point if you're heading to Lake Wolford. Their spring park hours are strictly 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. Since that catfish bite relies so heavily on those low-light hours, you literally need to be at the gates ready to cast the exact minute that clock strikes 6 a.m. Seriously, that first hour of daylight is your absolutely critical window. All right, bringing it all together in Section 5, Tactical Playbook, your weekend strategy. So here is your definitive 3-step battle plan for the week. Step 1, target the shallow flats. That is exactly where the post-spawn bass are guarding their fry, and those panfish are bedding down. Step 2, throw Senkos and topwater lures to trigger those aggressive territorial bass strikes. And step 3, hit the water early.
A 6 a.m. start perfectly captures that lingering catfish bite and the absolute most active trout feeding.
The conditions are perfectly aligned for us folks. The water is sitting right at that magic 70-degree mark, double-digit heavyweights are defending their territory, and literally thousands of pounds of fresh trout are swimming locally. You've got the data, you know the baits to use, and you have the timing down. The only question left is, which lake will you conquer this weekend? Thanks so much for joining me for this explainer. Get your gear ready, and I'll catch you next time.